They make cocaine. They have cocaine factories. They grow all sorts of crap that's drugs, bad drugs coming into the United States.
Precisely at 4 a.m., while the majority of Chicago lay concealed beneath a chill haze, the atmosphere abruptly changed. What initially resembled far-off thunder transformed into the deepening rumble of propeller blades. In mere moments, 23 government choppers zeroed in on a network of storage depots, cargo terminals, and supply centers dispersed throughout the southern and western districts of the metropolis. As stated in initial dispatches and subsequently verified by the Justice Department, this marked the commencing blow of Operation Steel Flood, a synchronized offensive comprising over 1,600 personnel from the FBI, ICE, ATF, and state police aiming at syndicate fortresses entrenched within the country's distribution lines. Viewed from overhead, the urban landscape appeared to be positioned beneath a sniper's crosshairs. Down below, reinforced carriers shoved their way through mist-shrouded avenues while combat units blockaded train tracks and depot passageways. The reality that detectives exposed was significantly more grave than a local narcotics gang, as government summaries would eventually disclose. The faction functioning within these structures operated as a militarized supply web employing hardened metal depots, shielded shipping crates, and cross-country freight paths to transport drugs and armaments with martial regimentation. The true astonishment arose from the speed at which officials attacked. How the administration knew precisely which spots to strike and why they acted with such exactitude during the first moments of daybreak remained the question. The explanation goes back to months of observation, concealed detectors, and a government snare arranged so silently that even experienced syndicate members failed to predict it. The instant the time reached 4 a.m., that ambush snapped closed. If you wish to track every covert mission, every clandestine strategy, and every development in the nation's obscure battle against systemic criminality, be sure to join Military Power. Over several months, the detectives silently moved their focus toward the country's center. And what they found was shocking. Beneath the facade of Chicago's commercial shipping lanes existed an extensive supply center constructed by the Lozes that functioned more like an army garrison than a narcotics circle. Inside depots scattered across the metropolis's rail zones and cargo docks, the syndicate had established the foundation for an enterprise vastly larger and more complex than basic urban trafficking. Unmanned aerial vehicles launched under the veil of darkness filmed tractor-trailers passing through cargo entrances without documentation. Crates being shifted beneath bright lamps as if getting ready for maneuvers. And refrigerated sections packed with unlabeled and untracked merchandise. What appeared to be valid hauling businesses concealed a system so deeply rooted that it could have been a combat assembly zone instead of a secret storage facility. The proof continued to mount, including shelving units, rigs equipped for distance travel, and rail yards converted under the gang's direction. Then the martial indicators arrived, as firearms previously viewed only in foreign war theaters appeared inside those identical depots. Transmission equipment utilizing coded frequencies was found hidden within regular transport boxes. Sentry posts constructed along the boundaries of the locations, stacked 3 levels high, watched over access gates in a manner that resembled a frontline base rather than a storage depot. The scanning and protection of the area, the utilization of tiered defensive spots, and combat armaments suggested this was not an average smuggling unit. It was a militarized framework inserted into the country's supply spine. As American bureaus examined the data, a specific category arose. This was not simply systemic crime, but a danger to homeland safety. That distinction was significant because it implied the system's objective reached further than illegal goods. It possessed the ability to move assets across provincial borders and potentially globally. That realization hit when authorities understood that a single Chicago center was not merely a depot but likely the core transfer point for a broader arms and narcotics conduit. A massive query remained regarding how such a mechanism had expanded inside American shipping lanes without being noticed until this point. While analyzing the detection stage, one detail became prominent. The syndicate had succeeded in weaving itself into the primary transit veins of the country, essentially commandeering the exact framework intended to transport lawful merchandise. Train tracks, hauling webs, and industrial zones within and surrounding Chicago transformed into segments of a concealed war zone. The boundary between commercial distribution and criminal distribution had faded so severely that government operatives were forced to revise their strategy from narcotics raids to tactical invasions. During a period when numerous citizens perceived syndicate dangers as distant issues along the boundary, the actual battlefront existed within the metropolis inside the supply chain they relied upon. This discovery compelled the federal administration to regard the web not merely as an illegal venture but as a disruptive power with martial abilities functioning in open view. Government officers assigned to the investigation observed quietly, monitoring discussions that resembled rebel status reports more than mob gossip. Via captured phone lines and hidden on-site microphones, they detected ciphered allusions to depots, tracks, and refrigerated zones, terms that did not correspond with any typical narcotics transaction. The surveillance groups understood they were not listening to a neighborhood crew but to an entity functioning with army-like exactness within the nation. Inside a residential facility comparable to a minor manufacturing plant, scientists found methamphetamine possessing a degree of refinement that broke local standards. In contrast to standard urban crystal, which might analyze at 60 to 70% quality, this substance was created at almost commercial levels, indicating that the process had utilized sophisticated chemical engineering techniques instead of the amateur cook method. The volume and excellence of the result informed detectives of one fact: this was no basement project but a supply-focused business designed for mass creation and delivery. Alongside the forensic proof, firearms experts tracked bullet shells and fired shots from Illinois to live war regions abroad. The movement of armaments was not unidirectional. The Chicago area was appearing as a crucial junction in a global weapons conduit. Government documents indicate that Mexican syndicates have historically depended on runners purchasing American guns and transporting them over the line. However, right here in the Central States, detectives discovered the opposite dynamic, with arms showing up in Chicago linked to wider foreign battlegrounds. The disclosure shocked the security sector. What if Chicago was not simply an endpoint but an origin site? Officers stationed in the observation divisions determined that to destroy this beast, the attack could not focus on one spot. They reinvented their strategy, deciding that 20 primary locations would need to be hit at once, including train stations, storage centers, freight terminals, and concealment spots. Consequently, the mission developed into one of the biggest joint force federal invasions in recent history. What initially seemed like a narcotics sweep now possessed the dimensions of a martial crusade. The administration privately labeled the danger as cross-border with militia attributes. In that moment, the categorization moved from systemic racketeering to homeland defense risk. The turning point occurred when a secret government record was found, exposing Chicago as potentially the main arms shipping center for a syndicate web inside the country. Data experts who had charted the paths discovered pause locations, front businesses, and stealthy cargo services all meeting at the Chicago train passage. The implication was severe. The enterprise was not merely circulating drugs but transporting instruments of combat. With this verification, every strategic choice was altered. The operational pace, asset allocation, and legal authorizations resembled those of anti-terrorism missions instead of typical drug detentions. As the officers completed their scheme, a vital query remained regarding how far the web reached and what destruction it could cause if ignored. Since the data indicated various provinces and global links, the government machinery readied for an attack not just on the terrain but against the leadership hierarchies in the shadows. Precisely at 4:42 a.m., the air over Chicago burst into activity. A ring of federal choppers banked into the gloom and bathed the roof of a huge depot zone in intense beam light. Beneath them, the motors of reinforced Bearcat transports bellowed as they smashed through the primary gate of one of the group's most fortified hubs. At this instant, the incursion dubbed Operation Steel Flood transitioned from a spying instrument to a total offensive. In seconds, marksman units assumed spots on neighboring roofs, their sights fixed on gun-toting guards who believed they remained concealed in the early morning fog. The watchtowers, constructed like small citadels surrounding what seemed to be a basic cargo lot, exposed their actual function. Operatives observed as the syndicate's sentinels lifted their guns, combat-class arms that even retired soldiers later characterized as more soldierly than felonious. The quiet timer finished when stun grenades detonated. Bright brilliance filled the court and officers in complete combat kits rushed in formation, securing every hallway and every crate dock. In Yard 14, a tactical squad encountered a trap where gang members equipping long guns shot from the rear of transport boxes and track shelters. Projectiles snapped, noise charges burst, and the attack turned from organized to turbulent in a flash. Reacting officers utilized a classic side entry maneuver. Units navigated lateral hallways, locked down trackside entries, and advanced into icy storage sheds where illegal products were kept. Stun devices illuminated whole corridors in blinding brightness, confusing the protectors. As soon as glass was shattered and gates were forced, the operatives advanced with accuracy, checking through piles of boxes and inspecting every corner. The syndicate's resistance was extensive with several tiers of sentries, video networks, and even sharpshooter cover from elevated positions. Nevertheless, inside of 11 minutes from the initial entry, government troops had seized command of the primary entryways. 73 gun-wielding subjects were overpowered, stripped of weapons, and shackled. The fierce battle at Yard 14 had lost the gang its advantage. But the true discovery occurred not on the shipping platforms but in the cellar of Building 17. Investigators found a protected, metal-shielded room piled with boxes labeled merely in cipher, such as Rail Unit 4 and Transit Node B. Inside those containers were cases of battle guns swathed in greased fabric with their identification digits filed off. Forensic logs linked bullet shards from those arms to war regions abroad, suggesting this site was not merely transporting narcotics but transferring combat hardware. One specific gun was tracked to a battle zone in Eastern Europe. Concurrently, facilities inside the depot compound manufactured crystal meth at quality degrees that specialists claimed far surpassed urban kitchen potential. Every piece of this proof indicated the identical result. The syndicate framework in Chicago had developed well past smuggling and now reflected the activities of an army. As sharpshooters on the roofs indicated safety and plated convoys retreated through avenues barricaded by government trucks. Officers announced via wireless that the intended web had been broken and numerous locations were safe. However, amidst the joy of victory, a query remained about why it required 11 minutes. The solution was found in the months of spying and data gathering that had charted every path, every sentry rotation, and every box transfer. The gang might have counted on being invulnerable in the center of the U.S. Yet the agents had completely reversed that expectation. Government leaders subsequently verified that over 20 key hubs spanning the train and highway cargo system were hit almost at the same time, transforming apparent neighborhood depots into the focal point of a countrywide war zone. Although exact figures stayed secret, the ferocity of the attack invited parallels to combat missions abroad. The Justice Department characterized the web as militia-like in organization, global in scope, and connected to war region arms currents, a label that propelled this incident into the sphere of homeland defense instead of common felony. By sunrise, the roads of Chicago's southwest manufacturing district were strewn with proof, including impounded rigs, locked depots, shackled gunmen, and unsealed, tallied boxes. For the initial time, the framework of a syndicate enterprise was revealed in broad day. Included in the listed objects were superior firearms, coded transmission devices, and transport logs displaying merchandise traveling beyond the province to foreign docks. Yet despite all the seized guns and narcotics facilities, the data groups realized the fight was nowhere near finished. The deconstruction of those locations might have pulled up the observable framework, but the system's anchors, its leadership centers, its secret funding, and its worldwide delivery links persisted. The query that continued to float was not regarding the number of detentions that evening, but rather how much time before the gang adjusted and developed once more. Inside the poorly illuminated cellar of Building 17, government officers found something that challenged standard descriptions of a narcotics raid. Deep under the cement ground and shaded cargo boxes, the area looked less like a holding chamber and more like the supply headquarters of an illicit military force. Beside a line of metal bins, guns swathed in grease-drenched fabric were piled, every single one having its registration digits removed. Detectives observed that these arms displayed indications of previous battle use, such as alloy stress, personalized alterations, and stamps matching alien stockpiles. That find by itself suggested that this enterprise reached far past Chicago's expressways and train lots. Adjacent to the weapons cache, specialists encountered transmission equipment possessing no commercial counterpart, including secure walkie-talkies, bespoke broadcasters, and combat earpieces, all obviously set up for missions more grave than corner dealing. The gear was extremely orderly and ciphered, prompting instant warnings for the operatives. As they proceeded deeper into the underground safe, they located lines of hypodermic bottles and closed barrels of fentanyl created not in a crude cellar workshop but on machinery looking like a production belt. The quality grades announced afterward by science centers mirrored this commercial size, suggesting that the production of this location could sustain a smuggling business of countrywide proportions. A single gun taken from the pile transformed the mission into a worldwide alert. Scientific tracking of its steel composition and tooling corresponded with parts known to have been utilized in a Middle Eastern war region. A detail that shocked the squad. This connection verified the spy bureau's darkest dreads. The web functioning from Chicago was simultaneously a drug channel and an arms pipe. With hardware meant for border crossing and foreign application, the account journals, locked data disks, and cargo route charts that appeared afterward depicted an entity with reach across several continents. However, the largest discovery arrived when operatives unlocked a collection of record inputs. The documents did not treat Chicago as a final destination. Instead, they listed the city as Transfer Spot 2. The main hub, Node 1, remained unidentified, yet the circumstances made it evident it existed beyond American lines. Abruptly, Building 17 was exposed not as a headquarters but as a stopover. The range of the task shifted. This was a strategic hub in a web extending from Illinois tracks to overseas war grounds. Amid the examination, experts stopped to describe how these guns were tracked by analyzing microscopic ID shards, tooling scratches on the metal, and firing characteristics. The FBI connected arms located in Chicago to events abroad. The procedure merged precise metal study with global firing records, allowing the officers to trail an armaments journey from the factory belt to bullet discharge overseas. That type of tracking emphasized how the Chicago activity went beyond neighborhood felony and impacted homeland safety. As the safe gate ultimately shut after the final science crew, the actual scale of what they had found became obvious: narcotics smuggling. Certainly, but significantly more than that. A mixed syndicate army enterprise with facilities, supply lines, and worldwide span. This find in Building 17 altered the character of the reaction from the quantity of weight to which war zones were being equipped. When morning light appeared over Chicago, the total size of the invasion became evident. When those 1.600 government officers struck 20 spots in a timed attack, they were not aiming at shops but clearing out the heart of a fortified system. More than 800 suspects were taken into custody, and among them, roughly 600 were identified as key operatives of the cartel-style organization. These individuals were not bottom-tier runners, they were the figures managing distribution paths, protecting transit routes, and giving commands. This number was verified in reports issued by police contacts the following day. The locations targeted had been mapped months in advance, ranging from reinforced warehouse complexes to hidden trucking depots and rail yards used as staging posts. Every location was secured with a single goal: swift, overwhelming force. In government discussions, the attacks were characterized as fast, conclusive, and exactly synchronized. The agents moved in like special forces teams striking enemy compounds, shutting down each node before the cartel could react. Once within, the corridor exposed the size of what detectives were encountering: huge amounts of crystal meth with refinement grades that eclipsed what corner peddlers typically vended, suggesting creation at a commercial level instead of illegal home workshops. Fentanyl in volumes sufficient to endanger several provinces with poisoning emergencies confirmed that these operations had become national in scope. Furthermore, there were the combat arms. Not merely pistols or traffic-long guns, but machine gun-style hardware and auxiliary gear connected by firing records to war areas overseas. Also given up were bags packed with money, account journals coded in various tongues, and transport lists detailing train stops, hauling paths, and border-crossing passages. Attorneys in Chicago's government tribunal started to build what would turn into one of the biggest organized crime and gun-running lawsuits in American records. Accusations spanned from arms trafficking and plotting to bring in chalk and send out war-class guns to creating and dealing drugs, washing funds, and involvement in a venture that stretched across provincial boundaries and country lines. Per official files, the proof gathered comprised digital records, coded messages, and the tangible machinery utilized to carry out the supply operations. Yet even as the primary actors were shackled, a more profound query hovered, with 600 central participants removed. Who would occupy the void? Illegal webs prosper in authority gaps. The instant those leadership hubs are eliminated, different groups or aspiring figures attempt to step into the empty space. Federal agents recognized this risk from day one. They had to not only strike now but plan to hold the space and prevent resurgence. Authorities characterized the web as beheaded on the ground. Yet they stressed that the remnants could adjust. They warned that the same infrastructure might shift east or south, or that the weapons and routes already in motion would find new conduits. The message was clear. Dismantling the network is only the first step. Maintaining dominance and oversight is the enduring battle. A strange assurance existed in the operations center when leaders examined the outcomes. One intermediate officer, scanning images of captured cargo boxes and gun shelves, commented that what they had found in Chicago possessed the mark of a war zone logistics center rather than a narcotics raid. The documents they scrutinized displayed train wagon journals modified to wipe paths, crate labels switched during transit, and account notes indicating endpoints abroad. However, even with vast sums of money confiscated and hundreds of guns removed from the streets, the mission's designers realized that the evening's effort had interrupted but not concluded the conflict. The shock and velocity of the invasion dealt a punch, a thunderbolt impact, but the actual landscape forward would entail spy missions, legal trials, holding tactics, and watching for fresh paths. Currently, a vital inquiry floated, with the syndicate's authority hierarchy broken in a night. Who would rise to take its leftovers? Would a splinter cell arise, more adaptable and less visible? Would a completely fresh band come out of the dark? The response would decide if Chicago had gained a victory or genuinely altered the campaign. As the grit landed over Chicago's shipping lanes, one fact became undeniable. Operation Steel Flood demonstrated precisely how America replies when a syndicate ceases acting like a felonious gang and starts functioning like a militia power. The size itself validated it. Within just one forenoon, over 1.600 government operatives swept through 20 fortified marks and placed 800 individuals under arrest. A number subsequently verified in official media updates issued post-mission. Chicago, temporarily at least, was rescued from a web that had rooted itself into the country's distribution line. However, the importance goes further than the statistics. Government leaders cited by primary broadcasters like CBS News in their coverage of syndicate supplies and arms movement have frequently cautioned that contemporary smuggling factions develop quickly, employing commercial techniques and international webs that copy the setup of military bodies. This explains why the American reaction appeared less like a standard bust and more like a synchronized commando hit. And although the operation delivered a decisive blow, the enduring struggle is merely starting. Per defense experts referenced in numerous countrywide studies, keeping a constant government visibility is vital to stop fresh groups from occupying the empty space remaining. Currently, a bigger query rests upon the metropolis. Will this takedown fracture the cartel beyond repair? Or will the organization reshape itself into something even harder to catch? If you wish to track the concealed struggles developing within the nation's boundaries, ensure you upvote this footage and sign up for my channel. For the upcoming events might alter your perspective on how the whole conflict resolves.